Have you ever wanted to be someone unshakable? Someone who remains unaffected by criticism, rejection, loss, or betrayal? Have you ever imagined the moment when that quiet pain inside you would finally fade? The torment that consumes you silently, even as you wear a mask of calm on the outside. Maybe you're exhausted from always trying to satisfy everyone, from upholding an image that demands constant strength, when deep down, all you ever wanted was a brief pause from the weight of being untouchable. But let me say something that maybe no one else has dared to tell you. The more you try to escape pain, the more power it holds over you. The more you attempt to numb yourself, to shield yourself, to hide, you stay a prisoner of everything happening around you. The words that wound, the actions that let you down, the silences that slowly kill you inside. And that's not a sign of weakness. It's simply the reality most people live with. The only difference is that some are just better at pretending. Carl Jung, one of the most influential figures in depth psychology, once said that we are not what happens to us, but rather what we choose to become. And it's there the real key is found. It's not about shielding yourself from the world. It's not about becoming cold, indifferent, or untouchable. It's about integrating. It's about bringing to light everything that currently affects you in the dark. Because true strength is not the absence of pain, but the full awareness of who you are, even when you are bleeding. If you've come this far, it's not a coincidence. This video is meant for you, the one who's tired of being hurt by everything and everyone. It's for you, who constantly feels emotionally outmatched, like others hold some kind of power over you that you just can't seem to grasp. I want to help you see that things don't have to stay this way, but to do that, you'll need to confront a few truths that might hurt, and maybe for the very first time, that pain finally sets you free. Let's begin. You often think that what causes you pain is something external, someone's harsh words, their rejection, the betrayal you never saw coming, the abandonment that left you hollow. You look out into the world and pinpoint your suffering in the actions of others. But here's the hard truth. These things don't have real power to hurt you unless there's already a wound inside you that they press against. What wounds you isn't necessarily what happens on the outside. It's the part inside you that recognizes and responds to it, the memories, the unhealed trauma, the beliefs you carry silently. It's the story you've told yourself over and over again. It's the version of yourself you've built around that pain, dressing it up as strength, as stoicism, as pride, as a need to be okay all the time, even when you're not. Carl Jung spoke to this clearly. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What this means is that the pain you feel when facing the world is not really about the world at all. It's a reflection of what still lies unresolved within, what has yet to be integrated. This is why some people can endure overwhelming, devastating circumstances and remain centered, even calm, while others seem to collapse under the weight of a single, misunderstood remark. It's not about what happens, it's about where it lands. Because when something hurts, what it's really doing is activating something you haven't yet healed. The words or actions of others are only catalysts. They trigger what already exists in you. That sting, that flood of emotion. It's familiar, isn't it? Not because the present moment is cruel, but because it echoes something deeper and older. And this is where the illusion of control begins to unravel. A part of you still believes, however unconsciously, that if you can just be good enough to be loved, strong enough to be respected, wise enough to be understood, you'll somehow earn protection from harm. You believe that if you can control how others perceive you, how they act around you, how they speak to you, then you can control how you feel. But that belief is a lie. Control, as we often conceive of it, is a fiction, and this fiction is what keeps you suffering. The more tightly you grip it, the more life slips through your fingers. You live in constant tension, scanning every moment for danger, calculating what to say, how to act, who to be, so that no one can wound you, and yet the hurt still comes. Why? Because you're trying to manage life from the outside in. But healing, real deep healing, can only begin from the inside out. Jung reminds us that the true battlefield is the unconscious, that the real enemy is not the other person, not the external event, but what lies dormant and hidden within us, what we haven't acknowledged, what we haven't accepted, what we haven't faced. The illusion of control is seductive. It whispers that if you just try harder, things will go your way. It makes you believe that emotional safety can be manufactured, that pain is a problem to be solved, rather than a teacher to be heard. The cost of that illusion is your freedom. As long as your peace is dependent on someone else's behavior, you are a prisoner of their choices. As long as your worth depends on someone else's validation, you are at the mercy of their mood, their trauma, their projections. You hand over your power one moment at a time, thinking it will buy you protection. But protection doesn't come from control. It comes from consciousness. And that is where the real shift happens. The moment you understand that no one can make you feel small unless there's a part of you that already believes you are, is the moment you begin to take your power back. The moment you recognize that external chaos only affects you when it matches the frequency of your internal chaos, is the moment you stop needing to fix the outside world to feel at peace. To stop suffering, you must stop trying to avoid suffering. That's the paradox. Instead of guarding yourself against pain, walk straight into it. Let it show you what still hurts. Let it reveal what's unresolved. Let it teach you where you are not yet free. Because your emotions are not your enemies. They are messengers. They are showing you where you've been living unconsciously, where you've been reactive instead of aware, defensive instead of open. Healing begins when you let go of the illusion that you can micromanage life into behaving for your benefit. The world doesn't owe you comfort. People don't owe you kindness, and you cannot force peace by controlling others. But what you can do is become deeply aware of what within you responds so sharply to discomfort, to unkindness, to betrayal. And this awareness is not passive. It is powerful. It is the kind of power that doesn't need to dominate or predict. It is the kind that simply sees, and in that seeing transforms. Because when you see clearly, you stop reacting blindly. You stop trying to change people who cannot love you the way you want to be loved. You stop molding yourself into someone who is easier to accept. You stop performing your worth. You begin instead to witness your inner world, and slowly over time, you bring light to the unconscious. You begin to reclaim all the parts of yourself that you've abandoned in your quest to be safe. And that's where real transformation lives, not in control, but in integration. Jung's message is not that we can escape pain, but that we can become conscious of it, work with it, learn from it. The more self-aware you are, the less triggered you become. The more you explore the unconscious landscape within you, the less power the outside world holds over your emotions. This is the work, not to fix the world, but to understand yourself, not to erase the pain, but to let it guide you to the places where you are still asleep. So if you're still hurting, ask yourself not who did this to me, but what in me still responds with pain. That is the question that leads to freedom, because suffering ends not when the world changes, but when you do, when you stop resisting what is and start becoming deeply aware of what lies within. And in the next part, we will go deeper, beyond awareness, into the process of integration, because your healing journey isn't about avoiding wounds. It's about learning how to carry them with clarity, with grace, and eventually with peace. Get ready. We're about to go one level deeper. If you find this content valuable, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. The greatest illusion you've ever been sold is that you are in control of your life. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? The idea that your choices are your own, that your reactions stem from logic, and that you navigate the world consciously. But the moment you begin to wake up, you'll see it's just not true. At least, not while you continue to exist in a passive state, moving on autopilot, reacting from instincts and impulses you never chose, feeling emotions that seem to arrive without origin, and sabotaging your own decisions without understanding why. Carl Jung articulated this with precision when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This isn't just a poetic quote. It's a direct challenge to the way you live. You're not free, not truly, until you confront the hidden architecture of your mind. Because right now, what feels like fate is often your unconscious playing puppeteer behind the curtain. And what is the unconscious? Not just some misty psychological basement where irrelevant memories go to die. No, the unconscious is a battlefield, a psychic war zone. It is the domain where old wounds fester, where unlived dreams whisper, and where fears you haven't dared to name take shape. It is alive, active, and it fights you every day from the shadows. That pain you feel in your chest out of nowhere, that unexplainable fury that bubbles up in a moment of calm, the sadness that sweeps in like a cold tide when everything seems to be fine, these are not coincidences. These are not random. They are signals, alarms going off from the battlefield within, from parts of yourself you've buried, neglected, or denied. Jung didn't view the unconscious as a passive container of old memories. He saw it as a dynamic, autonomous force, a second mind within the mind, a force that acts, reacts, and influences you whether you're aware of it or not. And as long as it remains unconscious, it continues to decide what you fear, what you desire, what you attract, and what you destroy. Why do some words cut through you like a knife, while others hear the same and remain unfazed? Because those words strike emotional landmines buried deep inside you, wounds that are still open, triggers that are still active, and they stay alive. Because you've never dared to look at them directly. You've only swept them under the rug, hoping they'll fade on their own. But they don't. They wait. They grow stronger in silence. And now you trip over that rug every single day. Jung warned us, we cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemning your feelings doesn't set you free. Denial doesn't liberate. It locks you in. But look at how you've handled your inner world. You've judged your emotions. You've silenced your instincts. You've tried to shame your way into growth, as if repression were the cure, as if pushing down the truth would bring peace. It doesn't. All it does is guarantee that the war continues below the surface. Here's the harsh truth. The unconscious doesn't die when ignored. It adapts. It grows sharper in silence. It manifests in subtler, more destructive ways. It hijacks your relationships, fuels your self-sabotage, and sows fear into moments of joy. You may call it bad luck, you may call it anxiety, but most of the time it's your unconscious fighting to be seen. And every time you numb, every time you distract, every time you escape into habits, people, or addictions, you reinforce its power. You hand it the reins of your life. Jung described individuation, the process of becoming whole, as a kind of confrontation. You must face the battlefield, not flee from it. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It is in the confrontation with your inner darkness that strength is born. And make no mistake, this confrontation is not gentle. It's a war of recognition, a return to buried memories, a re-encounter with every fear you've disowned. But this battle is not meant to destroy you. It's meant to wake you up. You want to stop being hurt? Then you have to stop running. You want to be free? Then you must learn the terrain of your own mind. Because until you know what lies beneath your reactions, you will always be a slave to them. The more you try to armor yourself against outside threats, the more vulnerable you become to internal chaos. The pain you've been trying to avoid isn't outside you, it's inside. And the longer you avoid it, the louder it becomes. This is why true strength doesn't come from defense. It comes from integration, from stepping onto the battlefield of the unconscious not as a victim, but as a witness, as a warrior willing to learn from the wounds instead of hiding from them. Your triggers are teachers. Your fears are maps. Your shadows are signals pointing towards something that needs your attention, not your avoidance. And here's the twist. The parts of yourself you've been avoiding, they don't want to hurt you. They want to be heard, seen, held, integrated. You don't become unshakable by building thicker walls. You become unshakable by building deeper awareness. The more you understand the terrain of your inner world, the less you are ruled by it. This is not just psychological theory, it's spiritual necessity. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but who you are is not found in your mask. It's found in your shadows." The unconscious is not just a place where trauma lives, it's also where your potential sleeps, where your power hides. And if you have the courage to face it, you will find something unexpected on the battlefield: wholeness. Because healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to hide. Let go of the fantasy that someone else is going to save you. Let go of the idea that one more relationship, one more success, one more distraction is going to bring you peace. You are the only one who can walk into your unconscious and come back changed. You are the only one who can take the sword of self-awareness and cut through the illusions. The unconscious may be a battlefield, yes, but you were born a warrior. And now is the time to remember that. So as we move forward, I want you to ask yourself, what am I really avoiding? What have I buried that keeps resurfacing? What pain have I mistaken for fate? Because in the next part, we'll explore what it actually means to be unshaken, to live from a place of inner steadiness that does not come from resistance, but from radical acceptance. We'll see how the path to power isn't built on shielding yourself, but on seeing yourself fully, deeply, and without fear. Because true strength is not about becoming untouchable, it's about becoming whole. Let's go deeper. Most people believe the only way to protect themselves from being hurt is to shut the world out. They think the answer lies in isolation, emotionally, mentally, even spiritually. They build fortresses of silence. They hide behind personas. They layer themselves with emotional armor so thick that not even their own truth can get through. They tell themselves things like, "I don't care anymore. Nothing gets to me. I'm done feeling." But deep down, behind that armor, they are still bleeding. Quietly, silently, sometimes even loudly, but only inside where no one can hear. Because here's the truth. The problem was never that you feel too much. The problem is that you don't understand what you're feeling or where it's coming from. And that lack of inner clarity only happens when you're disconnected from yourself, when you're still a stranger to your own emotional world. Carl Jung once said, "Know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as soon as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul." That soul he's talking about, yours, is not made of steel. It's not meant to be locked away behind walls of performance and control. That soul is asking, begging to be seen, but you keep hiding it, don't you? Behind a carefully constructed image of strength, stoicism, and distance. But becoming emotionally strong is not about becoming cold. It's not about building taller walls. It's not about detaching yourself from everything and everyone so you can finally feel safe. It's not about numbing your feelings or avoiding conflict or pretending that you don't care. No, real emotional strength is the opposite of that. It's about integration. It's about acceptance. It's about inviting into the light everything that you've stuffed down into the dark. You don't become untouchable by separating yourself from life. You become untouchable when you finally understand that no external force can harm what you've already made peace with inside. Because once your shadows are no longer strangers, they lose their power to control you. Once you've looked your fears in the face, They stop whispering lies behind your back. And once you've embraced your flaws, your insecurities, and the soft, tender parts of yourself, you become unshakable. Not because you've closed yourself off, but because you've opened yourself up with awareness. That's the difference. Defense builds fear. Integration builds freedom. You stop reacting to everything around you because you're no longer ruled by everything within you. You respond. You choose. You act with clarity. You are no longer being pulled on strings by emotions you don't understand. That is what it means to be truly free. And this is the very heart of what Jung called individuation. The journey of becoming who you actually are, not who the world told you to be, not who you pretended to be for love, for approval, for belonging, but the real you, the you that emerges from the alchemy of light and shadow, the version of you that is born from the integration of ego and unconscious. Jung said clearly, individuation is not a process of perfection, it's a process of integration. You don't need to become better, you need to become whole. But wholeness doesn't come from adding more, it comes from reclaiming what you've lost, what you've denied, what you've abandoned within yourself. And here's the part no one tells you. The more you try to run from pain, the tighter its grip becomes. The more you try to be unaffected, the more sensitive and fragile you secretly feel. The more you suppress what hurts, the more it chases you. This is why your triggers return. Why you keep repeating the same toxic patterns, why the same emotions resurface in new situations, because they are unresolved, not removed. But something powerful happens when you stop running from pain and start meeting it with presence. When you stop turning away from the parts of yourself you've labeled ugly, unworthy, or weak, and begin facing them with compassion. When you stop hiding from your truth, it stops trying to sabotage you. Because your strength isn't found in pretending that nothing affects you. It's found in knowing exactly what affects you. And why? It's found in understanding your own depth so thoroughly that no one else's words, actions, or rejections can break you. That's what it means to be unattainable. Not because you're untouchable, but because you've touched all the parts of yourself that others use to try and reach you. No one can manipulate what you've already made peace with. No one can shame what you've already accepted. No one can destroy what you've already integrated. The deepest form of power is not control. It's understanding, and that power is built slowly over time by being honest with yourself, by sitting with uncomfortable truths, by feeling your feelings fully instead of denying them, and by realizing that the enemy is not the world outside, it's the war inside that you keep avoiding. Becoming unattainable isn't about making yourself harder to reach. It's about becoming so deeply rooted in who you are that nothing outside of you can shake you. It's not about defending yourself with silence. It's about knowing yourself so well that silence becomes strength, not fear. You stop needing to protect yourself because there's nothing left inside that feels threatened. That is the ultimate liberation, when your mind, your heart, and your soul are no longer strangers to each other, when your inner world is not a battleground, but a sanctuary. But let's not romanticize it. This path, this process of integration, is not painless. It requires courage, real courage, the courage to look inward, the courage to remove the mask, the courage to admit that you're still carrying wounds you never wanted to acknowledge, the courage to feel emotions you once tried to bury alive. And here's the paradox. It is in the very pain you're trying to avoid that your strength is hidden. It is through the fire of discomfort that the truest version of you is forged. You think suffering is the enemy. It's not. Suffering is the messenger. It's the invitation. It's the gateway to transformation if you're willing to listen. You will discover that what you thought would destroy you is actually what rebuilds you, that your heartbreak becomes the foundation for your self-respect, that your failure births your authenticity, that your vulnerability opens the door to unshakable confidence, not the performative kind, but the kind that comes from knowing, not pretending. In the next part, that's where we'll go deeper into this paradox. We'll explore how suffering, far from being your enemy, can become your greatest strongest ally, when you stop resisting it and start learning from it. So, take a breath. We're about to step even further in, not to break you down, but to build you up from the inside out, because you are not here to become numb. You are here to become whole. And that journey, no matter how difficult, always begins the moment you stop defending yourself and start knowing yourself. Let's walk forward together. You were conditioned from an early age to see pain as the enemy. You were taught that to suffer is to be weak, that shedding tears is a waste of precious time, and that feeling deeply only exposes you to danger. So you began to run from the ache, from the discomfort, from anything that felt too heavy to carry. You learned to numb it, to silence it, to pretend it wasn't there. But suffering doesn't vanish just because you turn your back on it. It doesn't dissolve with your denial. Instead, it changes shape. It hides itself inside you, and one day it re-emerges, not as the pain you buried, but as something even more elusive. It becomes anxiety, a quiet restlessness. It morphs into anger, into numbness, into boredom, into habits of sabotage that seem to come from nowhere. Unacknowledged pain doesn't disappear. It digs deeper. It builds homes in your subconscious, carving out spaces in silence until one day the weight of it all pulls you into collapse. Carl Jung saw suffering not as a flaw in our design, but as an essential part of becoming who we are. To him, pain wasn't a problem to be fixed. It was a message sent from the depths of the unconscious, from the self, from that vast inner world we spend so much time avoiding. He believed pain was the soul's cry for attention, the psyche's way of demanding to be heard. He once said, "Depression is like a woman in black. If she comes, don't shoo her away. Invite her in. Offer her a seat. Listen to what she wants to tell you." But how often do we listen? We drown her voice in noise. We keep ourselves endlessly distracted, perpetually busy, constantly entertained. Anything to avoid that stillness, anything to keep from asking the question, what is this pain trying to tell me? The answer is rarely comfortable, because pain is not random. It's not senseless. It emerges from the battle between who you are and who you pretend to be, between the self that wants to grow and the ego that clings to safety. Suffering is born in that clash, in the friction between your evolution and your resistance to it. Because transformation is not gentle, growth does not arrive quietly. It asks you to tear things down, to leave behind identities you've outgrown, beliefs that once kept you safe, relationships that no longer serve your becoming. And this process, it feels like death, a death of who you thought you were, a death of what you thought mattered. But from this inner demolition comes something sacred, because when all the scaffolding falls away, when your certainties dissolve and your defenses collapse, what remains is something closer to the truth, not the version of you you've curated, not the image you've tried to uphold, but the raw, real self beneath it all. And in that moment, suffering stops being punishment. It becomes initiation. It becomes a rite of passage. It becomes the threshold through which you meet your own soul. Jung knew that suffering was never the end. It was the invitation to begin, the beginning of individuation, the journey of becoming whole, not perfect, not polished, but whole, integrated, real. Most people turn back before they reach that place. The darkness scares them. The silence unnerves them, so they go back to the surface where it feels safe, where it feels familiar. But the suffering remains, and it waits. But you, if you're hearing this now, it means something in you is ready to cross, ready to stop running, ready to face what's been buried for too long. This path will not coddle you. It will break what must be broken. It will stretch you past what you thought were your limits. It will ask everything of you, and yet it will give you something far more precious in return: freedom. The freedom to no longer be ruled by fear. The freedom to stop hiding. The freedom to finally belong to yourself. Suffering, when met with presence, becomes a guide. It will lead you to the places you've abandoned within yourself. It will take you back to the moments you disowned, the memories you buried, the wounds you thought made you unworthy, because every wound is a doorway, every ache is a call home. And when you stop seeing pain as the enemy, when you stop trying to escape it and instead choose to sit with it, you begin to unravel the story beneath the suffering. You begin to see that every breakdown was a breakthrough in disguise, that every ending was, in fact, a new beginning. Jung didn't promise that this would be easy. He knew that to confront the unconscious is to descend into the unknown. But he also knew that what you find in that darkness is the very thing you've been seeking all along, yourself. So stay, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because this pain, this heaviness, is not here to destroy you. It's here to open you, and in that opening you will remember you were never broken, you were becoming. Let us continue, because now we enter deeper. Very few have the courage to step onto the path of individuation. Fewer still have the strength and persistence to complete it. This journey isn't for those seeking comfort, praise, or predictability. It doesn't offer safety to your ego. In fact, it does the opposite. It dismantles everything you thought was you. Jung called this path individuation, not as a destination, but as an unfolding, a process of becoming who you truly are. But here's the truth that most turn away from. In order to become who you are, you must first unlearn who you believed yourself to be. And that hurts, not because the world is tearing you down, but because you begin to see clearly that much of what you identified with was never really yours. The accomplishments you wore like armor, the trauma you clung to as proof of your depth, the carefully crafted image designed to gain approval, affection, or admiration. These weren't you. They were constructs, defenses, things you built to survive. But survival isn't life. And individuation, that quiet, insistent whisper of the soul, is life's call to rise above survival. It's the invitation to live. When this call deepens, the unconscious begins to stir. It doesn't ask for permission. It brings everything you buried, everything you ignored, feared, or rejected, rushing to the surface. All the shadows, all the distortions, all the selves. You exiled in silence. And this is not chaos for the sake of suffering. It is the psyche reclaiming its lost pieces. Jung explained that individuation demands the dissolution of the persona, that mask we wear to belong, that mask of collective convenience, and he warned, it must be stripped away. You will have to peel back your own skin, not physically but psychologically. You will have to sit in the nakedness of your being, exposed to yourself. You will see things you don't like, feel things you tried to avoid for years. It will feel like losing your identity, and in some ways it is. But beneath that collapse is a foundation more real than anything you've known, because it is only by facing what you fear that you find what you're made of. When you've sat with your shame, your rage, your insecurity, and stared into them, without flinching, something shifts, something fundamental. You begin to reclaim your power, not by conquering those parts, but by acknowledging them. You say, I see you. You no longer control me. This is where true inner power arises, not from dominance, not from denial, but from integration. You begin to realize you don't need to be praised by everyone. You don't need to be right all the time. You don't need to pretend to be strong because you are strong. And your strength now comes from clarity, not performance. You've become untouchable, not because nothing wounds you, but because you are no longer defined by your wounds. Real emotional armor is not built on distance or detachment. It is built on wholeness. It is forged in the fire of your inner work. It's not a wall. It's a core, a center that remains steady, no matter what shakes around it. And once you've tasted that center, something in you changes forever. You stop reacting. You start responding, you stop living on autopilot, and you begin to inhabit your inner world with presence. But this inner depth, this return to your own soul, it comes with a cost. Loneliness. Not the loneliness of being without people, but the loneliness of realizing how few are willing to meet themselves this deeply. Most are still hiding, still clinging to masks, still running from their pain. And when you no longer do that, a gap forms, a distance, not out of arrogance, but out of evolution. You begin to outgrow certain spaces, certain dynamics, certain conversations. You can no longer pretend. You can no longer shrink to fit what you've surpassed. This isn't rejection, it's maturation. And this is one of the hardest parts of the path. The further you walk it, the more you will be misunderstood, but the more you will also understand yourself. And then, at a certain point, a subtle yet profound shift occurs. You stop needing protection from the world because your clarity becomes your shield. This is what Jung called the royal shield, consciousness itself. Not strength for its own sake, not defensiveness or resistance, but clarity, awareness, knowing who you are, where you stand, what is yours and what isn't. This inner knowing is the ultimate armor, because once you know yourself, nothing outside you can define you. You may still feel sadness. You may still experience anger, fear, grief, but you are no longer owned by these things. You don't resist them. You allow them. You listen. You move through them, not as a victim, but as a participant in your own transformation. Consciousness doesn't make you invulnerable. It makes you so present that vulnerability becomes a strength, not a liability. This is the heart of individuation, not perfection, but presence. The more conscious you become, the less control others have over you, the less you need to control others. You stop being reactive. You stop projecting. You begin to hold your experience with compassion and clarity. And in this state, everything changes. The world doesn't become easier, but you become truer. Your relationships become more honest. Your work becomes more meaningful. Your solitude becomes a sanctuary, not a sentence. Because you are no longer trying to become someone else. You are simply becoming you. And this becoming, it never ends. It's not a destination to arrive at, but a path to walk again and again, each time more deeply, with each step more of. The false self is stripped away. With each layer that falls, more of the authentic self is revealed. It's a return, not to who you were told to be, but to who you've always been beneath the noise. And the path is sacred. It demands everything, but it gives you everything in return. So if you're feeling lost, broken, or disoriented, good. Means you're right where you need to be. You're in the fire. You're in the unmaking. And that means something in you is preparing to be born. Keep walking. Let's finish crossing this together. We're nearly there. And now that you've come this far, something needs to be said with total clarity. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will protect you from the pain outside if you stay unaware of what's happening within. The words will still wound. The rejections will still sting. The losses will keep weighing you down until you wake up. And awakening isn't some magical moment. It's a choice you make every single day. It's turning inward, even when it hurts. It's owning every emotion you feel without pointing at others, your past, or destiny anymore. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." You've spent your life resisting the fear of being inadequate, the sting of rejection, the ache of loneliness, the agony of not being truly seen. And in response, you hid, you muted yourself. You tried to control it all. You aimed for perfection. You tried to stay strong. And all of that effort led you here, drained, worn out, exhausted from battling the world and yourself. But here's what you've come to see. Real emotional strength doesn't come from hardening. It comes from seeing clearly. It's not about building walls. It's about growing awareness. Because the moment you start understanding your wounds, your patterns, your triggers, the behavior of others starts to lose its power over you. You still feel it all, but you don't get swept away. You still hurt, but you don't lose yourself. And that makes all the difference. True protection doesn't lie in avoiding life. It lies in diving fully into it. Those who skim the surface get knocked down by every wave, but those who dive deep find something else. Stillness, strength, clarity, and that's where you're going. When you begin living from this space, a place of presence, wholeness, and acceptance, the world might try to strike, but it no longer finds a place to land. If something in this video resonated with you, if you felt something shift, drop a comment saying, "I choose awareness." Let's build a movement of people who are done pretending to be strong and ready to live from a place of truth. And remember, this journey continues in the next video. It matters. Don't stop now. Real change only starts when you move beyond the first step. I'll see you there.